These are my 3 favourite current features of the insurance policies that we arrange at with Jack. So number 1 is the reconstitution of electronic data. What does that mean? The insurer will pay you the costs of recovering data from a hard drive or CF card, something that you own that has suffered accidental damage, and now the data is lost or corrupt as a result of that. In other words, let's say you're a photographer, okay, and you're on a shoot, you've put your photos onto a hard drive and the hard drive suffers a knock, and now those photos can't be read, they can't be recovered. We can't help with that really awkward conversation you might have to have with your client, but the insurer can cover the costs of paying a data recovery company to try to recover those photos. And this is a really expensive process. The claims that we've had for this have been around £4,000 to £5,000. So that's why it's one of my favourite features. And it can even prevent a claim from a bigger amount from happening against you. For example, if you're having to say to your client, I'm sorry that the shoot that we've just done, we have nothing to show for it, they might try to recover the costs off you from what they've invested into that shoot. And this isn't just a useful feature for photographers. Any freelancer that's handling client data, deliverables, assets is at risk of that. Number 2, we're moving on to the professional indemnity policy now. My second favourite feature is the mitigation costs clause. So if your client is unhappy with the work that you've done and they refuse to pay you and threaten to bring a claim against you, the insurer will pay you the amount owed to you if it's possible to settle the dispute by agreeing not to pursue for the outstanding amount, and if the insurer believes it will avoid a claim for a greater amount. So that was quite a lengthy sentence, so let's simplify it and put it into context. Let's say you're a developer and you've been hired to build a website for a client, but the client doesn't feel like you've built all of the functionality that they wanted, and we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty about whose fault that is. Sometimes it's a non-technical client misunderstanding the scope, or sometimes it's the scope changing throughout the project and freelancer and client not being on the same page. But because the client feels like the website doesn't do what they wanted it to do, they're now not going to pay you. And they say to you, if you keep pursuing us for this amount, we will take things further. So that threat there, that could trigger the mitigation costs clause in your professional indemnity policy. Now, this is one of the most used features of the policy because your professional indemnity insurance is triggered if a client either threatens legal action against you or tries to recover compensation from you. So we can assume that if things have escalated to that point, then your relationship with the client has probably broken down. Things are quite bad and they're either not happy with you or the work that you've done. So it's not impossible to assume that they're not going to pay you, and that's why the mitigation costs clause is really useful and is one of my favourite features. My final favourite feature today, number 3, is the debt recovery clause, which is triggered when claiming for an outstanding debt owed to you, provided that you have exhausted your normal credit control procedures. So we've just talked about the mitigation cost clause from the professional indemnity policy, and that's triggered if a client isn't happy with the work that you've done, refuses to pay you, and threatens to bring a claim against you. But what if a client just isn't paying you? What if they have ghosted you? Or what if they're dragging their heels with paying you, promising they'll get it done next week and they never do? Well, that's where the debt recovery service from the legal expenses product comes into it, because a solicitor will chase your overdue payment on your behalf. They'll look into your client's finances to make sure they're not going into liquidation, because then there would be no money to recover. But if they deem the chance of success 50% or higher, they'll then pursue your overdue payment for you. And we find that having a third party do this, especially a legal entity, yields a much higher chance of success of getting paid. Obviously, you'd only go down that route in quite extreme cases, but it is a relief to know that there is help available if you do need it. And that's all from me on my 3 favourite features of the policies that we arrange at With Jack.